It is Locked On Jazz for the 22nd of July. Latest rumors. Make sure we remember who Donovan Mitchell is. And who are the young Knicks players that we're talking about? Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly. We break them all down today on Locked On Jazz. Pow!
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms, all apps, all whatever it is, including YouTube. It's Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Latest rumors, reset on Donovan, and we talked about Quentin Grimes and Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly all the time. Who are they? What do they actually do? If they become Jazz players, what value do they have? So let's actually dig into them today. But let me start with the latest rumors. First, not Donovan Mitchell related, but Eric Paschall is talking to a team in Greece right now and expected to sign a deal with a Greek team for the season. No word yet on Juancho Hernan-Gomez or Trent Forrest and where they're playing. Patrick Kinahan, yesterday on 1280 The Zone on Thursday, said that he was getting text messages that the deal was done and that there were details that still need to be figured out, but it was a haul and the deal was done. Andy Larson, Salt Lake Tribune, reported, I'm getting a lot of the same stuff, but not sure. Steve Popper out of New York said, no, that's not true. So that's where we sit right now, is kind of waiting to see what the story is, but clearly conversations are still going. Clearly it still feels like we're heading in that direction. Kind of a wild time as a Jazz fan, and, somewhat, I think, flabbergasted still to this day for all of us. I bumped into a good friend in the airport yesterday, and, I think we're all a little flabbergasted that we've gone from the number one regular season record, one more season, and then it seems like an entire rebuild. We'll see if that happens. I still have this lingering, maybe Donovan sticks around and we build through and we can build pieces around it. I want to take a second on that note. I mean, let's just, I'm going to hang on to some hope for that because I love Don. So I just feel like it's a little bit out of New York right now. It's this kind of backwards, or as Snowbird would say, bass-ackwards approach of, well, we want this guy, but let's diminish who he is a little bit so that we don't have to give up as much. And you can kind of hear it a little bit even when I did the show with Locked On Knicks this week. Let's remember a few things about Donovan. He's 25 years old. He's a 3-time All-Star. Okay, that sentence isn't said very often. He averaged 25 points and 5 assists last year. He's like one of 12 players that's done that for 2 years in a row. For most of last year, he was the number one pick and roll guard in the NBA, which is partially because of Rudy, and Rudy was the only pick setter that was in the top 10 with multiple players, but it's also because Don's awesome, because Don was great with Whiteside also. He ended up being the 5th best pick and roll player in all of the NBA. Okay, Jalen Brunson's cute and nice and a nice player, and, some of these other guys around the league, but we're talking about a different level pick and roll dynamic player here. Could he pass out of it a little bit more? Sure, if we want to be as we have done to him, nitpick him to death with it. The dude's great. Of the top 100 pick and roll players in the NBA last year, his points per chance, which includes passing, he was the 5th best in the NBA. Who are those guys that are better? Chris Paul, Seth Curry, Trae Young, Luka Doncic, Donovan Mitchell, Drew Holiday, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. Patrick Beverley was actually top 9. And Jordan Clarkson was actually 10th. Anthony Simons was 11th. Kind of interesting little notes there. On isolation drive, I didn't think he had as good a year as he could have, but he was 30th of the top 100. It's elite. He's one of the great catch and shoot guys in the NBA who had a bad catch and shoot year, but has become a Dame Lillard quality off the bounce three-point shooter. Like, I don't want to hear slander on Donovan Mitchell's game. He's 6'1". Okay, that's a legit question in a league that's getting massively big, in which no players in the NBA draft this year were under 6'4" who were drafted in the first round. In a league in which the Dallas Mavericks are 6'5" or taller at every position. That's legit. His defense could be better. So could most guys. Let's stop. It's not great last year, right? I've said this numerous times about Don. He's going through a career evolution, and I didn't think the way he handled superstardom and his evolution last year was as good as he had in the years past. That's a natural progression that a player goes through, and that he'll figure out how to deal with in his next spot and how to stay engaged with the team. Fine. Sometimes the place where you are and you're progressing is where it's hardest to sometimes tell what's going on. But let's not have some absurd slander either out of Utah fans who are like, trade him, or out of Knick fans who are trying to justify that they don't want to give up a haul. The dude's great, and he's an awesome person. This might sound stupid and minor to you. Some of you will tell, it's Locke just... But this is a subtle thing I'm going to share about Donovan Mitchell that matters to me, that tells me who he is at his core. When not any of the all-star stuff is hanging on, when not any of the Adidas stuff is hanging on, when not any of the expectations are hanging on. In multiple arenas, when we go to shoot around on the road, as a media guy, we sit like 2 rows back. Sometimes in Dallas, they literally walk right by us. We're sitting like in the scores table or the media table, like right here. We're 3-4 rows back, and then they go do shoot around and we watch shoot around. We're just sitting there. Don will be the one guy who says good morning. He'll hey, how you doing, Locke? Nothing. We're not best of friends. Don't misunderstand anything I'm saying. I'm like twice his age and have 1/100th of his income. Like, we're not hanging. We're not friends. He gets traded. I might talk to him again. I might not. Probably not. So don't misunderstand. This isn't some ego play with me. It's a subtle little, he says hi. He says hi to Thurl. He says hi to Bowler. He says hi to me. Because that's his soul. He's a good guy. So I just want to make sure we don't have any silly slander going on here with Donovan from either side of this equation. I know I got a bunch of Knicks people listening. So the dude's amazing. If you trade and get Donovan Mitchell, he's incredible. He's the best dude there is. He's a fabulous human. He's got a great heart. He was Ken Griffey Jr. with the zest he played with. I hope he regains it. He's lost it a little bit. And he's an unbelievable offensive force that this league has very, very few of. And if you get him, he's amazing. And if we keep him, great. Let's just make sure we got that. All right. One thing I think that's going on here is obviously the draft picks are what's going to dictate whether this deal gets done or not. But there are 3 young players who have been talked about a lot in Quentin Grimes, in Obi Toppin, and Emmanuel Quickly. Who are they? What do they actually do? I got panned for this from a bunch of New Yorkers that somehow claim I don't know anything about the league. That's good. Tell me I don't. You can criticize me for all sorts of crap. But since I've been in the league since 92 and was in the building when Jordan took the shot and was in the building when Stockton took the shot and have covered this league for longer than you've wiped your you-know-what, go ahead and blast me for the lack of NBA knowledge. That doesn't bother me at all because you're just right. So, but I made the comment that with New York players, if they ever have a good game or the minute they get drafted in New York, they go to the top of the marquee, and therefore we believe more. They're more well known. You can do the same thing in Cleveland and Detroit. No one's ever heard of you. So let's dig into the facts on Quentin Grimes, Immanuel Quickley, and Obi Toppin. We're going to start with Quentin Grimes, the least well-known and the youngest of the group. I don't know if he actually is the youngest. He's the least experienced of the group, but maybe the one who has the biggest elite skill of the group. So we'll do that as we continue. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street. Also located in Logan and in Linden. The Murdochs have been in Utah for over 80 years. They are part of the community, and the Hyundai brand is absolutely fabulous. If you do the research, what you'll find out is you get the most for your dollar. As you've heard, we bought 2 Santa Fe's. I just bought an Ioniq, or put an order in for an Ioniq, and looking forward to get that. Why? Because when I did the research for the dollar figure and all the bells and all the whistles, it's the right product. It's absolutely remarkably well done by Hyundai, and then you're dealing with the Murdoch Group, and they are true Utah through. If you're going to go over like Zach Lancaster just did, Zach, email me back and let me know how the experience is going. Email me first at dlock09@gmail.com, and we'll send out a little note to our various salespeople, give you the lockdown VIP experience so that you're set up as you arrive. You're already got who you're going to talk to. It's all taken care of for you. Ease the process over at Murdoch Hyundai. So please email me first at dlock09@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up. Zach, make sure you send me a little note. Anybody who ever goes through me on those, I do want you, like, if you're listening, stay in touch. Let me know. Somebody sent, I think it was Mitch Manning, sent his dad over the other day. Mitch, let me know how that experience went. If something's going wrong, we'll take care of it. Make sure you get the VIP experience you're supposed to get. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Summit Cap. Summit Cap's an interesting group. They're a venture capital kind of investment company. Like, venture capital's got a mean name to it. But what Summit Cap really is a bunch of a Utah County company, and they invested in Locked On, which is how I got attached to them. And what they're looking for now is they are looking for people that have been in the business, that probably are running a company for an owner. The owner, I'm going to get really specific here, is phasing out in some way, or isn't really ready to take the company to expansion, because expansion takes a bunch of time and effort. And so they're content where they are. But as the person running the company, that you could take this to another site. You just don't have the money to do it, and so you can't get it in. Well, that's where Summit Cap comes in. They'll provide the capital for management seeking to buy out owners of the business they work in. So Dave and Jeff and Matt are Summit Cap. Really good people. When we worked with them and they invested in Locked On, never once did I hear, hey, when do we get out? What do we get? Instead, what I got the whole time is good questions about the business to try to help us along and make sure that we made progress. So if you're an owner seeking to sell your business, if you're an entrepreneur seeking capital, or if you're specifically someone in management who's looking to buy out the owner of their business, reach out to Matt at Summit Cap, 801-796-2033, 801-796-2033. You can email me, I'll set you guys up, or lockedonjazz@summitcaputah.com. That's lockedonjazz@summitcaputah.com. NFL Top 50 is done today. Who is the most valuable, impactful player in the NFL according to lines at Bet Online? Go check that out at Locked On NFL. It's been really fun to see. There's a 5-day series on it, so if you want to grab all of it. All right, let's start with Quentin Grimes, who is the first one for us to touch on here. And his background, and he's out of the University of Houston. I want to see, Obi Toppin, by the way, is 24, and Quickly is a little younger. Grimes comes in after kind of he's 22 years old, so I do think he's the youngest. He grew up in Woodland, Texas. He was the 8th ranked prospect out of the 2018 class. He's the 25th pick of the first round in 2021. So he's an interesting player. He's played 1 year in the NBA. He played 46 games. He averaged about 17 minutes a night, and he averaged 6 points a game. And so he's still in the rawest term. He started his career at Kansas for a year, and then he went back to Houston, and by his junior year, he averaged 18 points a game. What does Quentin Grimes do well? So first of all, what's super interesting about Quentin Grimes is your first reaction is, well, he's 6'5", and he's 205 pounds, so he must be a great athlete. I'm not sure that that's actually true. His transition numbers, which to me are often a sign of athleticism, were really poor last year. He shot 20 of 50 in transition. It's in the 16th percentile, and it's only 40% in all transition. He didn't pull for 3 a great deal on that. He is one of the best spot-up shooters in the NBA. When you want Quentin Grimes, you can tell me you've seen the highlight through Summer League where he makes the big steps to the rack and everything. No. This is a pure catch and shoot spot up shooter. He went 143 of 342 he went 63 of 153. Sorry, 63 of 153 on catch and shoot last year at 41% on 3-point things. He's not an off the bounce guy. He was just 8 of 35 for 26%. So he is legitimately like one thing, spot up shooting at this point in his career. 91 first percentile on spot up shooting. Transition, he was in the 16th percentile. On pick and roll, he shot 0 for 9. So he only ran 14 possessions as a pick and roll guy the entire year. You'd have to go back and look at Houston. He began a little bit of handoff action, but it's not a part of Thibodeau's offense. So if Will Hardy's going to institute handoff stuff, maybe that's where you're going to see him. But so he's purely like, you can talk about anything else you want about Quentin Grimes, former first-round draft pick, late out of Houston, and we can dig into his college numbers, which I have not prepared, he is truly, truly just a catch-and-shoot guy. On offensive pick and rolls, like derived out of his offense, it didn't even create very much on his own personal. As I said, he went 0 for 9. Dribbles off the pick. He's just not a very good shooter off the bounce yet. Pick and rolls, in which he initiated, the team went 8 of 26 shooting. So they were not particularly strong there. There's not an isolation game to him. His dribble jumpers, his off the bounce three, as I mentioned, he was 8 of 35. Dribbles into jumpers, he was 6 of 15 for the season. He does kind of, his preference to take one dribble to his left and kind of pull up for a jumper to try to keep the three alive. And that's probably like all of his off the bounce threes that I saw that he makes. He does not have an isolation game at all. Like, that's not something you're getting out of him yet at this stage of his career, or maybe ever. So pure catch and shoot. Now, at 6'5", the offensive numbers don't look great on a defensive end. What about, like, what kind of defensive player is Quentin Grimes? So if we start to look at the Knicks defensively overall, Quentin Grimes comes in the 39th percentile of overall defensive when he's the defender. To put that in perspective, the worst on the team was Emmanuel Quickly at 36%, and Nerlens Noel at 32%. Julius Randle was in 38th percentile, and Quentin Grimes was in the 39th. So not super there. Guarding spot ups, so that's closing out. He was particularly poor. He was in the 10th percentile. So now maybe that's rotations, young player, not quite knowing where rotations go, things of that nature. He's not quite right. Guarding the pick and roll ball handler, he wasn't bad. He was in the 67th percentile of guarding the pick and roll ball handler. Quickly was better at 74th. Derrick Rose was really good for the limited time he got last year. Cam Reddish was actually really good in his limited time last year. Isolation defending for Grimes, he was super. Only 19 times did he get isolated out on an island. Team players went 3 of 13 shooting against him, so maybe that's a sign of a little bit, limited action there. But on the other end, this is like where you see the youth particularly poor guarding on the handoff. So open space, knows how to do it. Handoffs, that's a first-year player, pretty inexperienced, probably not knowing how to get through the screen as well in some of those areas. And then, those are kind of the little notes. I think you have a talented shooter who is a one-dimensional offensive player that has enough skills to defend and has to learn the league. That would be my overall take on who Quentin Grimes is, that you're getting. Former first-round draft pick, knockdown shooter. His QSI, which is, I think, the best way. It's a second spectrum data point, which is the best way to determine what kind of a shooter is. If you look at QSI, it's Durant, Seth Curry, like the best of the best, or like who leads QSI every year. And QSI basically means of the shots you got as a player, what percentage above what the league average player would do on those same shots, if that makes sense. So, in other words, if Kevin Durant takes a mid-range shot from 18 feet that's contested, and he'll make it at a much higher rate than anyone, else in the NBA. And so that's why he's the best QSI. It's his length, his height, all those kind of things. If you take the guys who took, at least 300 shots last year, which gets you to about 270, 200, almost 300 players. Here are the top QSI guys in the league. Like the worst, I'll give you as well. But Kevin Durant, Seth Curry, Kyrie Irving, Chris Paul, DeMar DeRozan, Luke Kennard, Nikola Jokic, Anthony Simons, Rashawn Holmes, a little push shot, and DeAndre Ayton. Actually, I'll continue because I think it's interesting. These are the best shooters in the NBA. Tyrese Halliburton, Brandon Clark, Mitchell Robinson, Tyrese Maxey, Devin Booker, Brandon Ingram, Desmond Bane, CJ McCollum, and Jarrett Allen. So sometimes the big guys down low have a little bit of a different standard. If you're wondering, like George Niang is 44th. Bogdan Bogdanovic is 45th. Jazz players come in a little bit later. Donovan was our best shooter at 65, 4 percentage points better than what he should get. So Quentin Grimes ranks 143 out of 342. So probably in the 40th percentile or so, or 60th percentile or so of players there. So again, 143rd out of 342. It's a little bit better than if, he's ranks a little bit lower than a third. So he's probably in the range of, as I said, the 60th percentile of all shooters. So he's good, but also part of what's happening here, what that tells you is that while he's in the 90th first percentile of overall percentage, what you also have going on here is he's getting great looks because of who he is and how much he's not being guarded. And that's kind of what that tells you. Who is Obi Toppin, former top 10 pick? Is this a piece of a puzzle that the Jazz want for the future? We continue and look at that here on Locked On Jazz. And he's another one who has kind of one skill, and we'll touch on that as well. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar. They're doing amazing stuff. What's the latest flavor? It's always so exciting. You go to Built.com to find out what it is, and then you just keep... It's s'mores. They're still available. S'mores Puffs are available for you, and they are remarkable. Chocolate brownie chunk is available as well. I might have to order those. 160 calories, 15 grams of protein, 9 grams of sugar. I've been holding off, but I think it's going to be time here for the order from Built. S'mores and chocolate brownie puffs plus banana cream pie, coconut marshmallow, and churro puffs. This is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. I literally now eat it as my lunchtime dessert. I'm a total sweet tooth, total snacker, and I'm going to the Built Bar after a small lunch to get me my sweet tooth fix each and every day. And it's, frankly, it's worked. I know you can see the beauty of this 51-year-old face slimming down. Okay, not really. 130 calories, 2.5 fat grams, 4 net carbs, and 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. It is Built.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Bet Online. Make sure you go grab the top 50 at Locked On NFL, but also get in on the Major League Baseball action as we're back underway. The pitcher's duel today is Matt Scherzer versus Darvish with the Mets against the Padres. The over-under line on that one is just 7. And Ohtani against Morton with the Angels and Braves also have the over-under at 7. Ohtani on the mound tonight for the Angels. Make sure you grab that. World Cup numbers are out there as well. NBA futures, NBA team wins beginning to percolate. The Boston Celtics are the favorite to win the title with the Milwaukee Bucks. This keeps shifting. How fun is this? Warriors at plus 700, Clippers at plus 700, Suns at plus 900, Lakers at plus 1100 by the Nets and the Bucks, and we're dropping down to find the Jazz now at plus 25,000. The Knicks are at plus 660. Interesting, by the way, here's the Eastern Conference odds to win a championship. Celtics, Bucks, Nets, Heat, Sixers is the 5 seed, Raptors is the 6, Hawks is the 7, Chicago is the 8, New York is the 9 seed, Cavaliers is the 10 seed, and Charlotte as 11. Knicks in the play-in, and they've got to be projecting the fact that they have Donovan Mitchell at that point. That's all at betonline.net. All right, who is Obi Toppin? So Obi Toppin was a top 10 draft pick, came out of the out of Dayton, small school, 6'9", 220. He's won the slam dunk champion. He was the 8th pick of the 2020 NBA draft. One thing when a player has not materialized a lot in a draft yet, which Toppin has, I like to look at who were the next picks. So like when Dante Exum wasn't developing or Trey Burke, like you look at who the next picks were to tell you like, well, did the draft just run out of talent? And that's why he went there, or is he just not developed? So the picks before was Killian Hayes, who's not been great. Denny Advada was the next pick. He's only been okay. Jalen Smith has kind of busted. Devin Vassell has been okay, probably a good pick by the Spurs. Tyrese Halliburton's been great. Kira Lewis has been hurt. Aaron Nesmith is not developed. And Cole Anthony. So there's a little bit, and then Isaiah Stewart and Pokashevsky and Josh Green hasn't, and Sadiq Bey has been good for Detroit. So there's a little concern here that this draft just ran out of talent. When you look at Obi Toppin, that like you can get excited that he's the 9th pick of a draft, but it does look a little bit. He is still an elite athlete. He's in the 95th percentile of all action in transition. So you've got a big body at 6'9", 220 that's just a bona fide like beast athletically. He is not a great shooter yet on spot-up shooting. He's in the 40th percentile of all shots on QSI, which we just talked about a moment ago. He ranks 273rd out of 342. So this is not a guy who's shown signs yet that he can stretch. He's a transition player. He's very good off the cut. He tried to play some pick and roll ball handling this year at 6'9". They tried to work that in. It didn't go particularly well. He's in the 11th percentile of that. He's not bad on the offense glass. And on switches, he can post up. That's where he's going to be valuable if he can be a good defensive player is at 6'9", 220. He's an elite athlete who can run. He probably should be able to switch a little bit defensively. We'll dig into that a little bit. He's a little heavy, like big-bodied and heavy-legged for someone who's got as much bounce as he does when I watch him. But he does have post-up ability. So in other words, you run the pick and roll with him as the roll man, and he can get down. Now, as the roll man, he was not particularly effective last year. And they tried once or twice when I watched him, like a few pick and roll ball. That's just not he's not going to be a 6'9" ball handler in any way. And you'll see that some of his isolation stuff's a little interesting because he can get kind of isolated mid-block and go take you. He doesn't do a lot of it. Like his isolation game's really pretty limited. According to Second Spectrum, they give him a little bit more isolation attempts. I mean, very, very few. And he ranks 162nd out of 500. So he's actually in like the 60th percentile, but it's so slim on numbers, it's hard to tell. But the post-up's not bad. Again, slim on numbers, but not bad. What he is, again, his shooting's not great. Catch and shoot last year, he shot 32%, 31 of 97 off, no game off a bounce. 3 of 13 on a dribble jumper off the bounce. So pretty, that's what he is. He's his post-up, which they ran about, no one runs post-up anymore, is okay. Might be limited in the limited sample size solely to the left block, frankly, and solely to the left shoulder coming to the middle, but it's hard to tell on that. Again, there's just so limited sample. So offensively, what is Obi Toppin? He's an athlete at 6'9", 220. He can probably play pick and roll, but only against switches. He doesn't seem to be a guy who's a roll man. They didn't have many good point guards to find him either. He's not going to stretch the floor. And then let's look at him defensively. Overall, Obi Toppin defensively, according to according to Synergy, Obi Toppin ranked in the 44th percentile, which is it's fine. Like he probably had some tough matchups on spot up. So when he has to go out, he was super good guarding guys on spot up. So he closed well. He's a big body. He's 6'9". He's bothering that shot. He's probably athletic enough to move in that. If he got switched onto a pick and roll ball handler, it happened very often, but he seemed to be fine. Guarding a pick and roll man, he was really poor. This is where he was in the 11th percentile. Again, limited action here. Mitchell Robinson got most of that handling pick and roll men last year, but sometimes if they slid him or someone got him in pick and roll, he was the least good of the New York Knicks in that area. Gets out on the floor in isolation, that uses that size pretty well defensively. He's in the 37th percentile defensively, which isn't great because he fouls too much. He ends up fouling about 22% of the time in which he gets caught in isolation, which is super high. Only Immanuel Quickley was actually higher. Emmanuel Quickly's numbers are through the roof. 37% of the time, Emmanuel Quickly fouls someone that he's guarding in isolation. But Toppin's is super high there as well, which he does a good job against the shot. Player shot just 9 of 28 when Toppin was in isolation defending, but he does foul a huge amount on other just kind of things where, he should never have to guard in a handoff. If he's guarding in a handoff or guarding off a screen, you've actually done something wrong defensively, but he's actually okay. He will probably have to guard in the post up, and it was limited, but he was pretty good at that. So summary on Obi Toppin is you have still an elite athlete who wins the slam dunk contest, very good in transition, who does not have much of a shot game for you yet. He's probably got to play 5 because he can't shoot, and he's 6'9", 220, and so can he switch that? And then can you offensively, if he's playing the 5, play him in the short isolation area and have him beat guys off that or play a little bit on post up on areas there. But again, maybe similar to Grimes, pretty limited in what pieces there. So when you listen to the New York people talk about they're going to be this and they're vital pieces, yeah, okay, great. They can't sniffed on. So add another draft pick is basically what I'm saying. All right, let's do Emmanuel Quickly before we wrap this up today. Emmanuel Quickly's name seems to be quieting a little bit in all of this, which is interesting. I loved him out of the draft. He's 6'3", 190 pounds out of Kentucky. So he's another one of these guys where you're who's the Kentucky player like Tyler Hero, like Devin Booker, that's in a draft that got overwhelmed by the amount of talent at their school. And you wonder, he got drafted 25th, and he's been 2 years in the league, and he came out at a really good first year, or at least had a decent first year. His effective field goal percentage is 49%, so he's below league average. His overall shooting is 39 and 39 the last 2 years. Let's not get stop New Yorkers in trying to make these guys sound like they're all-stars. They're pieces of puzzles maybe, but they're not all-stars. So Quickly as an overall shooter ranks 132nd out of 234. If you go to the 200 guys took 234 most shots, Quickly was the number 1 pick and roll handler for the Knicks last year. He was one of their main shooters in his 78 games. He took 9 shots a game. He was 11 points a game. He was a primary piece because they just had no point guards. So he ranks 132nd out of 234. So that's below mid-level. So he's average. On drives, he ranks 86th out of 202, so right about average, a little bit better. On handoffs, he's not very solid yet. He's 79th out of 100, and pick and roll, he ranks 53rd out of 100. So, and in isolation, he ranks 70th out of 100. So, lower 30% on isolation, according to, and we'll look at some other numbers on him as well. On second spectrum, pick and roll, he's in the middle of the pack. Handoffs, he's not great, 77th out of 100. Drives, he's a little better than league average, and overall shooting is about average. So this is that's fine. Being an average NBA player is really, that's a valuable piece to the puzzle. I'm not, don't discredit that. In transition, he's in the 41st percentile. As a pick and roll ball handler, he had a pretty good year last year. He was in the 78th percentile, and he was the primary ball handler for the Knicks. So, if Grimes is a shooter and Toppin is a transition athlete who can post a little bit and maybe handle some things defensively, Quickly's your ball handling pick and roll guy. He's thought of as a shooter, but he's actually not an elite shooter like Grimes. What he really is a pick and roll guy. He was in the upper third in pick and roll. He ran the most pick and rolls for the Knicks last year. It was pretty good at it. Spot up, as I mentioned, is in the 40th percentile isolation. He's right in the middle of the pack, according to Synergy, which is a little different than what Second Spectrum has. So when you look at his shooting, off the bounce, he shot 35% last year. And his catch and shoot, he only thought 35% last year. So these are not epic, awesome shooting numbers. I think people think of him a little bit as though he's a primary, as a really a big scorer, kind of as a shooter, but he's really a ball handler. So his pull-up shooting, he took 259 off the bounce threes last year, which is a lot. That's a great sign, actually. 259 off the bounce threes probably puts him in like the top 20 of the NBA. It's the same kind of number that you would get out of a Mike Conley or a Darius Garland. And if you were to take the guys who took the top 50, which is, elite level off the bounce 3-point shooters. So it's guys that took 150 threes or more last year off the bounce. The best in the NBA, let me fix that. I just made a mistake. The best in the NBA last year was Desmond Bane, followed by Mike Conley, Drew Holiday, Darius Garland, Tyrese Halliburton, Kevin Durant. Those were the only guys that were over 40%. Quickly's right behind Don at 35%. Like, he's in the top 16, 17 off the bounce 3-point shooters. So this is what he does. He can play the pick and roll. If you go under, he can come up and rise up. He can walk it up and take that shot. It's pretty impressive. Like, that's an elite level skill for who he is as a player when you're talking about Quickly. So Grimes is your pull-up shooter. Toppin is kind of your body athlete. And Quickly is really an off-the-bounce 3-point shooter, is probably his greatest skill at this point. I always love when I do searches involving Knicks players and they initially go to playoffs and then they never show up. But his catch and shoot game's really poor, frankly. He's, his natural shooting, which I think some people think he is, it was 32.6%. So his standstill shooting is not terrific. So Quickly has to play with his ball. That's when I said, I don't know if he's really very good for the Knicks with Brunson and Donovan Mitchell. He doesn't really fit. He took 132 catch and shoot threes last year. He made only 43 of them. And so if you start to look at players who took 100 catch and shoot threes last year, that falls into a pretty low level at that percentage. The best in the NBA last year of guys that took 100 were DJ Augustine, shoots 48%, Simons 48%, Curry. You want to go find guys that took 100 and shoot 30, below league average, below 34%. You're into a not very high. There aren't a lot of guys that are doing that. Quickly's in the one of the lower percentage guys in all of the NBA at that point. So that's worth kind of keeping an eye on when you talk about him and what his skill sets are. So that's where we sit with these guys. That's kind of who they are. I don't think I've got anything else I would add on Quickly. Defensively, I didn't get to Quickly defensively. And it's a mixed bag. Like, if you look at the overall numbers on Quickly defensively, he's at about the 31st percentile. I think it was, I said earlier, overall defensively, he's in the 36th percentile, which of New York Knicks players, only Nerlens Noel was worse last year. On spot-up shooting defensively, so this is, do you affect the shooter in any way, shape, or form? Quickly came in, why can't I find, at 38th percentile. Guarding the pick and roll ball handler, he wasn't bad. He was in the 74th percentile. And then isolation defending, he was in the 6th percentile. He fouled 37% of all times he was defending anybody in isolation, and guys shot 52%. So last year, statistically, one of the least good isolation defenders in the league. So you've got it. Like, these guys they're all pieces. They're all developing pieces. This is a little bit of the Jazz trade for them. Can we develop them into something more than what they were? The Knicks have never been known as a great developmental spot for players. And so can you be the ones that develop them into something different than that? We'll be able to see, but that's where, how can you maximize Toppin? How can you maximize Toppin on the catch and shoot, by the way? Derek White was the worst catch and shoot guy in the league. Toppin was actually the 9th worst, and then Quickly comes in about the 20th worst, 25th worst of those kind of guys. Actually, give Quickly a little bit more than that. I had flipped that around. Derek White was not the worst. I forgot about Jalen Suggs was 22%. Josh Giddey 25% on catch and shoot. So they're actually, take that back. Toppin was I had it backwards. Toppin was about the 40th worst, and Quickly was about the 60th worst of 239. So, that's a good summary of who these guys are we're talking about. We hadn't really done that before. We'll see what happens this weekend. If something breaks, we'll keep you up to date on it. I'm bouncing around Montana next week. We'll try to get shows out for you. And the next week after that, I'm gone, and I probably will stop getting shows out for you unless there's still stuff to talk about. So at some point, we got to take a break here and get ready for the season. Have a good one. It is Locked On Jazz. Thanks very much for tuning in and making Locked On Jazz your first listen. Make Locked On NFL today for the top 50 your second listen. It is the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.